Well, good morning, everyone. We are here live at Annie's Bait Shop right here in Cortez, and just checking out the bay, and the weather conditions are pretty good right now. Strong east wind is moving through, not really strong, but stronger than it has been, which is a good sign. Again, we can see dead fish floating by occasionally here and there. Joining me now live is Captain Scott Moore. Captain, how are you today?
Hey, good morning, Bob. Good to see you.
Good seeing you on such bad circumstances. I know that this has been a big story, obviously a national story as well, with a lot of people all across the country watching what's going on down here. I know you just got out of the bay. You did a little drive-through. What did you experience?
Well, there's pockets still of red tide, mainly in the bay. But you know, yesterday I had a charter and we went up into Tampa Bay and caught quite a few fish in the clean water. And it gets technical, Bob, you know, because you're carrying bait, and some areas are clean. Right now there's still some tide around, but there has been very little episode in front of Anna Maria. They're open for business. The restaurants are open for business. I suggest one thing: people call a restaurant and ask them what it's like there, and a lot of them are open. Anna Maria, you've got all those restaurants on that beautiful beach. Most of the fish has been cleaned up. Unless we have another event and there are a lot of fish are on the beach, it's beautiful out there.
Yeah, now I noticed that this particular area right here had just a couple of days ago was loaded up with dead fish. I see just a couple floating around here right now. What's been going on as far as the dead fish goes, and how it's been actually looked, you know, how are you seeing it?
Well, it gets technical. You're a weatherman. We've got an east wind, so it's going to blow any fish that have floated in here. And by the way, the fish that float in here didn't necessarily die in here. They could have died in the tide line 2 miles away and been blown in here by the wind currents. Okay, Palmasola took a big hit, Bob, and there's been a lot of fish in there, a lot of fish in the canals. So the wind direction is going to shift these fish from one side of the bay until they decompose or are taken out of the water,
right,
which is a big problem. The main thing about taking the fish out of the water, which I learned through START and through Moat and their scientists, that the fish in the canals, if they die and decay, can actually regenerate the nitrogen, regenerate the red tide.
Oh, so it kind of feeds itself.
It could feed itself in certain. Then I learned that, with that. So it gets kind of technical. What we want is a breeze.
Yeah.
We want that wind pushing and moving the water around. And like I said, Tampa Bay right now, we haven't had any major red tide event. There can be red tide in the water, but it also can be there in a natural form, and fish still alive, okay? And when it gets to that certain parts per million, technically, then it starts to kill fish and marine animals and stuff.
Now, I talked to a guy who's actually volunteering and a scientist down there for Moat Marine, who's taking samples in Venice. And just yesterday, he was showing up with 1.5 and 2 million cells per liter still in Venice. So it's still around, and you've been down here fishing now for 40 years plus. Captain, you know these waters, and you've seen red tide come and go. What is your assessment of this particular red tide?
Well, my assessment on the red tides, if you go back, the last major event we had after Hurricane Charlie, okay? All right, red tide is a natural in the Gulf, in federal waters, comes into state waters, and natural event until you hit the nutrients. And the connection to me is the nutrients. That containing the nutrients and keeping that under control will help. We will always have natural red tide. It's there, it's in the water, okay? And what's important that people understand about that, putting on your lawn, if you're near a canal, use slow fertilizer, okay? Be smart. Be smart about any chemicals, okay? That helps, okay? Other counties, our county put in the sewer system in the 70s when I graduated from high school, thank goodness. Think of Charlotte County and these other counties and all these canals that are on septic tanks. Septic tanks, affordable, needs to be hooked up. Things like that can really help. You know, you have people that live on those canals. They could be retired. They need to make it affordable for them to change out and go into the central sewer system. That would help. There's so many variables, okay? And what this is not green, blue algae. Okay, that's
Yeah.
fresh water, but what the connection is on national news when it shows the bad water going in the Gulf and we living along Anna Maria, the west coast of Florida, that's like a BP oil spill down there. It's gone all over the world as being this toxic water put in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's the connection, okay?
Yeah.
We will always have red tide. It's a natural
but
phenomenon.
not necessarily the blue-green algae that's coming out of
Right. That was released into the system because the Corps of Engineers has to release the water, okay? And it's technical there.
Yeah. Now,
Okay.
now you speak of the differences, obviously. The blue-green algae, you've got the red tide. That's nutrient-filled as well, that
Right.
blue-green algae. And you're seeing a lot more large sea creatures down
I
there.
can never remember horseshoe crabs. Now, it can get, they're talking about, some of the science talking of 10,000 parts per million. No, 10 million parts per million.
Per
I mean,
liter,
it's like,
per liter, yeah.
I'm sorry. And that's like Jello. You raise anything, it's not going to survive in that kind of environment. You've got horseshoe crabs, you've got mammals, porpoises, they're air. When you have down south of here, Venice, they've had this 3, 4, 5 months, and these animals are in that, and they get pneumonia. I'm sure that it's respiratory. The poor manatees, the same way.
Now, red tide can kill manatees and large mammals as well here in the water, right?
Supposedly, the scientists say, yes, if they're feeding off the grass and they take in the little tuna cakes, they ingest that. But you got to think that a manatee's got to come up and breathe. And when you have this out here, this red tide, they're breathing the air constantly, and they get in their lungs.
And the neurotoxin.
I'm sure they get the neurotoxins in their lungs.
Yeah. So as far as I know you went to the meeting last night.
Right.
Yes. I was out there.
Very good.
Anna
Very
Maria.
good. Very good.
What did you learn from that meeting last night?
Well, the main thing is people don't realize, from the dishwasher all the way up to the waitress and the bartender, it hurts people. When you have a restaurant that, typically takes and services 300 people for the night, and there's 50 people show up, it really hurts their pocket. What we want to do is, if those beaches are clean, we want to bring those people back. And for the news media to go out there and physically say, hey, there's no fish out here. Now, just because there's red tide in the water, if it's not in a full bloom, okay, it's not doing damage, okay? Matter of fact, last winter at one time, the guys were out there surfing, and they were complaining about their eyes burning, and we used to surf, and a little bit of coughing going on. Well, that's red tide, but it didn't have a full bloom effect. It didn't kill fish.
Right. It could be on the top of the water column, middle of the water column, and bottom of the water column.
Very technical.
It is technical when you say that. There's a lot to be learned, obviously, with this red tide. Moat Marine's doing a tremendous
job. Yeah.
Kind of keeping an eye on it and doing their testing as well. What have you noticed today? I know you were out there. You saw some fresh kills as well, right?
Yes. From right here, from Cortez Bridge to Manatee Avenue, we've had reoccurring events. There is old and new, okay?
So you're saying
fish.
Old and new fish that are showing up. So you got old dead fish that have been around a while.
Right. And some fresh.
And some fresh. And so you've seen that. What are some of the fish that you've seen?
Well, what's sad is, here's the scenario. Especially on game fish, which I'm very, very concerned about. South Florida, the snook came out to spawn in June, Bob, okay? And they had events of red tide that were horrible down there and caught those fish. Little Gasparilla Pass, which I hope we can get Moat to go down there. I hope they do assessment on this, because the state doesn't have a lot of money, all right? And some of the things that have been going on, it really hammered the broodstock snooks from Lombo Pass all the way south. There was major event in these fish in the passes. What's happening now that I'm very concerned is redfish, what redfish we have. And the big redfish are going out, September, go out to spawn. And they're gonna go. And it's gonna kill it. What ones we have, it's very technical. If they go out these passes and have to get out, it's not going to be a good scene, especially if you got a major event going on.
And I think you showed me a picture today. You saw
Yes.
you saw a redfish.
That
out
was
there?
a 33 to 35. That's a broodstock fish.
That's a sad scenario there.
Yeah.
I mean, considering what's going on. As far as captains go too, this is having an impact on their lives.
On everybody. It's very, very hard on the captains. Normally it is slow this time of year.
Right.
My son and I, we have quite a few regulars through September is a big month. September is a great month for captains. You've been out when they're busy catching redfish. It's a big event, and then snooks. And as you go into your fall, and let's just hope that wind does something and helps us out a little bit here.
I know people are hoping for a storm. I'll take a tropical, low.
Something.
I don't want a hurricane.
Yeah, on the edge of it.
Yeah, exactly. So enough to kick up the season and
Yep.
stir up the water and mix it up a little bit.
Yep.
Have you noticed that in the past that red tide? It's difficult to say when it's going to go, right? I mean,
we had a meeting a while back in Manatee County, Marine Extension Service, and we had one of the main scientists for updwellings. And this guy is an expert on updwellings. And I had mentioned to him, how come every time we have a major event on a hurricane, that year after, and all the nutrients,
right.
and and he goes, yeah, in that kind of form, but I base it on a natural phenomenon. He says one hurricane in North Florida blew the red tide out. It got so severe it actually blew it out. But that was a particular area. And by the way, years ago, they didn't have red tide. Very few events that I've ever heard in North Florida.
In North Florida, you're saying?
In North Florida.
In West Central, it's more of a West Central Florida phenomenon,
Yeah,
obviously.
that's right. Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor is usually the epic deal.
Right, but they have had it in the past. I have seen some, but not as much, not as frequent.
much.
Right.
No.
All right. Well, I think, Captain, that we're all hoping that it goes away. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're concerned about the dead fish and the smell that it's bringing to some of the communities here.
And there's health concerns. You want to try to get that fish out of the canals if you can. Be careful. There is people doing it. There's fishermen in Cortez that are doing it, cleaning the canals out. And it's a good thing. You want to try to get those fish out.
But it could be dangerous. Who knows?
You gotta know what you're doing.
Yeah,
I don't suggest somebody throwing a cast net and pulling the fish up and putting them in unless they're in a
protected.
I would say do not throw a cast net. Dip net, okay? Because I am not going to throw a cast net in red tide lane water and put it in my mouth.
Oh yeah.
Unless you're putting it on do not put it in your mouth. You can still throw a cast net if you know without putting it in your mouth, but you're dealing with. You better know what you're doing.
Right.
Okay.
I didn't even think about that. Because if you cast net, you're going to be doing that over
some
and over.
put it in their mouth, some don't. It just depends on how they've been taught to throw a cast net.
As far as the red tide is concerned today, with this nice east wind, I have not sneezed out here. I have not had any eye irritation, throat irritation,
wind.
Nothing going on right now.
No south wind, no southwest, no west.
So
you can have a sea breeze in the afternoon. You're going to feel a little bit of respiratory. There is mackerel jumping in the water off Coquina Beach. Scott Greer with the Stray Dog headboat. They go offshore. The offshore fishing has been phenomenal. He went out the path, said there's mackerel jumping out here.
Okay.
And mackerel don't hang around. It's an inshore right now, bloom, thank goodness. Okay. Seems to be, and I have not heard of anything past 7 miles in that zone. Have you?
I've not.
No.
I've seen people coming back from the offshore trips and
Catching beautiful mangrove snapper.
They're catching some big
fishing.
fish, yeah. And you set up near Terracea, it's not bad here either.
No, Terracea, mouth of the Manatee River. Now that's not saying it could change, but as of yesterday, Tampa Bay. Normally, Bob, if it does come in Tampa Bay, it will come in the deep water of the ship channel, go up in the bay, go up into the Port Manatee, and then come back.
Right.
Okay, because of the currents.
Right.
And unless we have the 2 weeks of unbelievable, I've fished all my life, I've never seen that many days of west wind.
Right.
And the tarpon fishermen didn't like it.
Right.
It was horrible for us.
It's been an unusual summer with that west wind, man.
Technical.
Yeah, that west wind has been really unusual this year.
And you're a weatherman, you know how much west wind.
Oh,
I was going to call Rick Davis and ask him to analyze how much we had in June in July.
What was the anomaly of
wind.
west wind? Because predominantly our winds are from the east-southeast during the summer with a west coast breeze
Sea
developing
breeze.
every afternoon.
Yep.
Yeah, and we just haven't had that pattern set up. And hopefully this pattern sets up here in the next month or so and blows some of this.
You're going to get blamed, on the weather. The weatherman always gets blamed.
Captain, thanks a lot
You
for your
bet,
time
Bob.
and filling us in on what's going on out here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, ABC, for covering this event. Okay, we appreciate that.
Appreciate your time too as well, Captain. Well, there you have it. A quick summary from one of the legendary captains here in the west coast of Florida, who's been doing this for over 40 years. And he says that there are some fish out there in the Tampa Bay area, but just looking out over the bay here, I can see some fish bobbing there. And with this east wind now, we're seeing a lot of the dead fish rolling into the canals on the east-facing canals on the islands. So that's a problem now. So hopefully it all gets out of here with a little bit of a storm and a little bit more wind. We need the winds to pick up and the wave action to increase as well. All right, folks. Thanks a lot for joining me, and this will wrap it up for right now. Live in Manatee County at Annie's Bait Shop.